Like, you got it. And then it'll be 2 seconds, 3 seconds.
Good morning, everyone. Please welcome Romej as our first talk.
Hey, that was easy. You are missing a great talk in the next room. I almost want to change my entire presentation after listening to Moxie. And I think he's still going, as a matter of fact. So Moxie's in the next room as a keynote speaker, annihilating SSL and telling us a little bit about the history of that, which is kind of concerning. I did notice by being able to scan the audience in the other room is that I clearly, getting out, number one, I dressed inappropriately, except I see a suit back there. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, another suit. Thank you. Thank you. I was feeling really bad. Of course, Phil, one of the sound guys. That counts. He doesn't have a tie, but that'll work. That works for me. So it is becoming readily apparent to me, unless someone wants to admit in the room here, that they're also an attorney. So, that's true. I am the only attorney in the whole building. I apologize, but we have to show diversity. So I am with the law firm, Paul Render. I probably, if someone does know me from my prior life, I was with Putzel Long for 13 years, where I chaired the technology practice group and the electronic discovery practice group. So I got a little bit of a different background, so everyone's saying, what the heck is a lawyer doing here? I'm actually an old computer programmer who went to law school as a second career, and my practice pretty much is 24/7, is international as well as around the United States, and all I do, I'd say a big part of it is data security breaches. So I was hoping today, at least Chris Payne was hoping, that I would introduce you to some topics that would get you acclimated to why is a lawyer going to be involved in your life if you're going to be doing this for a living. As I said, Moxie, when I think of the speakers that are here, it's just fabulous. This is really a nice event that Chris Payne put together, but I couldn't help but laugh when I think of how many institutions are relying on SSL for security, and Moxie's in the other room just ripping it apart. So it's scary, and it's why I'll always be able to pay my mortgage. I'll always have something to do. The history of data security breaches, which I'm not going to repeat what Moxie did, but there's a lot of surveys out there that are a lead-in to my practice. I don't know if you follow anything that Dr. Larry Poneman does. But in his 2009 survey, he found that 1,000 people, and he just surveyed 1,000 people, had been laid off, and found that 60% of them left the company with data. That's a big number, and that explains why I'm busy all the time. I'd say a huge portion of my practice is inside jobs. A different kind of security breach that most IT departments, I'm learning in my career, are not focused on. I'm finding overly broad permissions and access to employees. I have one just about 6 months ago where it was the vice president of a research and development company here in Michigan. And what basically came down is the CEO asked me to come in with my forensic team at night, so we didn't want to upset the employee days. And we were just going to peruse and see what kind of activity was this gentleman having. The CEO was concerned that he was coming in late, leaving early. He thought maybe there was a divorce pending or some imbalance in his personal life. The man had worked with him for 18 years, and he wanted to take care of matters and address his personal needs. Well, unfortunately, by 3 in the morning, we had discovered that this gentleman, and this entity had Department of Defense contracts, was sending materials to an IP domain in Iran, and had been doing it on a regular basis for months. And this is one of my many stories where, again, maybe IT departments don't love me, is I close with, and the IT guy got fired. Because the first thing I asked for then was the Internet Proxy Server Log reports. We used certain items to create scripts to target in on the address for this man's office. And it was very clear he'd been doing this for months. And it was also very clear that the IT department of this company had been collecting those reports. Can you imagine what that was like by dawn when the CEO and the general counsel of this company show up, and I'm sitting there with this IT person who was the owner and custodian of these reports. He very angrily, as a matter of fact, looked at me, crossed his arms, and said, "It was not my job to read the reports." That was the last thing we said before the door hit him on the you-know-what out the door. There's also another study aspect of the survey that Dr. Larry Kahneman did, where we get into more of the breach format, where 81% of these corporations he surveyed reported losing one or more laptops containing sensitive company data a year. A year. And that's the other side of my life, which is trying to analyze and determine what was the data population on the devices that were lost. Sometimes it's amazing. I find that there's no asset inventory on these on the equipment. I'm going with vague descriptions that I think it was a Dell. I end up basically in a lot of these having to go to the HR department to read the job description of the individual who lost the device. And all the while, I'm in institutions that are fairly large. If anyone tracks my record, I represent a lot of universities and hospital systems in the Great Lakes area. It's amazing to see the bifurcation of information and the lack of scope of what IT feels is their job and domain, what the legal department thinks is their job and domain, and what the executives think is their legal job and domain. And that when I'm in these environments and reacting to, because by the time I'm called, something bad has happened, you know. It's just a real shame that a fundamental concept of even data mapping doesn't exist. That I have to actually look at organization charts and guess at what the data population on the lost device actually was. And then, after listening to Moxie, and there's so many great speakers following me that had something way more substantial to say than a lawyer like me, I have to make a comment at a fundamental level about how the end users, with all the sophistication that's at this conference, how the end user can blow the back doors off every kind of security metric you can come up with. I really love this study that it's now Dr. Matt Weir. While he was working on his PhD at Florida State University, he actually did a survey of passwords in corporate America. He got the various CIOs to participate. And has anyone heard about Dr. Matt Weir in the password survey? You're not going to believe it. So for all the stuff we're learning about, the tools that are available for hacking and how it's readily available instructions on the internet, the #1 password in corporate America is 123456. Serious. #2 is 12345, and #3 is 123 ABC. And now, for God knows what reason, I have no idea. #10, and just jumped out at me, is Princess. I don't know where the heck that came from, but that's a real thing. So, can you imagine, with all the great work all of you professionals can be doing, your end users are just going to knock you to the ground and your knees, probably. When you see what they're doing for innovative passwords. Yeah, no security wall or firewall in the world to protect you against that. The survey that I really, really respect, and if you have time to download it, is the one coming out by Verizon. It's what, in the 6th? This will be its 7th year. And in 2009, they received a great gift. Is anyone familiar with the Verizon data on data breach? Yep, there's one. Okay, it's the 2010 Data Breach Investigations Report. And they got a great gift because they have a new data population now. The United States Secret Service is contributing their data breach case studies to Verizon. In fact, I think we're going to have some speakers. I think it's at Secure World. Chris Novak is showing up from Verizon, who will speak on this in great detail. But I do recommend it as a great reading material, something also to use for discussions with executives when you want your budget expanded a bit. But some of the sad disclosures of what's going on with the DVIR is that most breaches are discovered by external parties. And in fact, the leading method of discovery is the individual credit card owner receiving notice from their own credit card issuer. That's pretty scary, 6 years in a row. Most breaches also could have been avoided without difficult or expensive controls. The Verizon study goes into great detail, there's a whole chapter on it, that most breaches have nothing to do with highly sophisticated attacks. It's really all about stolen or weak credentials, or worse, because then there's a man or woman behind this. IT is not monitoring user activity and setting appropriate levels of access and privilege. The study found that configuration changes and altering existing practices fix the problems much more often than a major redeployment and or new purchase. So a very sad testament and conclusion about how some of our IT infrastructure and operations are addressing these issues. Now, the Verizon study also categorized their data sets by these industry groups, and of course what rises to the top is financial services, and that would be due to the amount of regulations that surround their activities, the fact that they hold PII, personally identifiable information, much longer than maybe other industry sectors, and as a result, they have more vulnerability. The hospitality and retail are following close behind them, though, and that would be related to the heavy credit card usage and their point-of-sale systems. You know, they're only as strong and survive based on the security of those POS systems. But an interesting statistic about these hacks, especially since in data breaches, is that in healthcare, with all the commotion, and there has been for many years on HIPAA and high tech, this particular survey only shows there are 3% of the population in this case study, all the way at the bottom of the end of the rope here. And another interesting statistic is that over 50% of these breaches, especially for financial investigation or financial information, occurred and originated outside the United States. Very interesting statistic. It really helped this year, I think, for the Verizon study to get the Secret Service data. And the threat agents. Again, I like to use the Verizon format. And I used to teach computer assurance at Walsh College and at Washtenaw County Community College. And so this is kind of the standard, and it's pretty practical. External, internal, and partners. Partners being the business associations, relationships you have with the corporation. External being the hackers and sources outside the company, and internal, of course, being the insiders. There's also a couple of multi-agent breaches that go on, and that would be a combination of external partner, where the partner of the corporation actually has the compromise, and then it's a dominoes effect, and you fall down with them. Or you have an external-internal combo. And I have to admit, I live in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and with our economy, the way it has been over the last few years, I have seen in my practice a huge trend, or at least people, maybe I'm just getting more popular and they're calling me, is the internal employees getting approached by outsiders and bribed for either intellectual property, customer lists, but I have to admit by far my most popular calls are massive identity thefts at major corporations that I am tracing to a payroll clerk. And in law school we get this tiny little course in profiling, but it's only to pick out a jury. So I don't have the training of law enforcement. But these people look like people you would go to church with. And I'm finding a lot of anger as I do the exit interviews as well. I'm finding that a lot of the groups that approach them know who they are. And how sad is that? These are payroll data entry clerks making, just slightly over minimum wage. So they're absolutely, hopping, skipping, and jumping when somebody offers them $250,000 to download onto a thumb drive. Got one hanging around my neck. To download the employee master database with birth dates and everything they need, social security numbers. And it's amazing how it's always on a Friday, and by Sunday, it's all gone. And the perpetrators are so aware. They only want large corporations that are stable. Because guess what? They've guessed that the employees have stable income and have assets. It's actually considered a grade A steal. That's why they get paid so much money for this. And how unfortunate for these payroll clerks to realize how easy it is for us to determine that for the first time in 4 years, a thumb drive was attached to their desktop. Just stood right out. There was no getting around it. So we have to rethink about security. Security is a lot more than the bits and bytes and the technical hardware. A lot of it is just homegrown. The Verizon story really points that the Verizon study just puts a spotlight on it, is that so much of security in our organizations is common sense. This lack of permissions and privileges, where it's broader than it needs to be. Someone who is only authorized, can you imagine, doesn't even follow a CPA audit about checks and balances. This one particular woman was only authorized to issue the checks. She wasn't even the reconciler. There's little steps for everything else, but no one thought of it when the software application was installed, and it's a national brand, to limit her access and privileges. No one thought of it. In fact, here's the worst part. I did it, because I just happened to be there. It took me 3 seconds. 3 seconds. When I showed the HR director, she almost fainted. And then again, it's another story, and the IT guy was fired, as well as the business sponsor for that application, software application. They thought that was extra. That was extra implementation work. It was a screen. The employee's name, what can they have access to? It was point-and-click. It was a very state-of-the-art software system that they had paid a pretty penny for. It took me 3 seconds to reset. And I said, well, while I'm here, I get paid by the hour. You want me to do anybody else? Well, they had 17 software modules associated with that system. I'm sure there's someone still working there trying to get these addressed. So we have to pay attention. We have to pay attention to the types of employees we have, especially in Michigan. This is really the #1 threat that's happening. And especially since the Verizon study puts another interesting twist on. They found that 24% of the data breaches by insiders were individuals, if you were to profile them, that either had a job change, and this is incredible, had resigned, which means they were not disabled from the system, were fired, or a new hire, or someone who had been demoted in the organization. So areas of concern is to check out the grants of privileges and access and make sure they match up to the person's job function. I've seen a lot of marketing individuals leaving and taking customer lists with them. Just so you're aware, that's a violation of the Michigan Trade Secret Act, and you can't do that. And a lot of them actually do that and sell it to their new employer, or use it to steal the customers outright at the new engagement. That's a problem. I wanted to talk about, this is a bad way to learn that fax machine hard drives. Let's talk about scope of security here. These are well, yeah, most of these are I am disassociated, but I think I gave that away. But a bad way for a CEO and executive management to learn that fax machines have hard drives is to get a call from CBS Evening News. And this is really sad, because this is not rocket science. That's a drum I like to beat. Maybe that's why Chris Payne just wanted me to show up and give a speech. It's like everyone else who's talking here, they are rocket scientists, and I'm just a lawyer trying to make a living, and it's just amazing to me to see how bad some of these breaches are, and it is all due to a lack of common sense. In fact, the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, now has on their website a new brochure for people who have fax machines, and it's available for free as a PDF. They have a data security guide for business in your copiers, so that you realize that if you have a copier, I think there was a specific year. Yeah, every digital copier since 2002 has a hard drive. So just so you know, tax returns, paychecks, medical records are on these things. In fact, that's unfortunately what happened to the Affinity Health System. It was found in a warehouse in New Jersey getting ready for resale, and they found 409,000 medical records on the hard drive. So that was an interesting call. Dear Affinity, do you want us to delete that before we sell it? Keep you out of some trouble. Now, this one is also personal to me, because I got my very own notice on the data breach. The Sony PlayStation. Again, last spring a lot of stuff was cooking on breaches, but I got my very own Dear Carol Romej. We have discovered that between April 17th and April 19th, certain PlayStation Network service user accounts were compromised. Darn. I couldn't play for a long time. Or it's usually my nieces and nephews. So anyways, the actual notice comes out, so it's amazing when it's personal. You know, we believe that an unauthorized person has obtained the following information that you provided: my name, address, country, email address, birth date. Oh, thanks a lot. My password, login, my handle for PSN, and it's also possible that my purchasing history and billing address have been compromised. And then they proceed to remind me in the data breach notice that at no charge, U.S. residents can have their credit bureaus place a fraud alert on your file, and they strongly recommend it. Well, thanks a lot. There's been a lot of stories since then, since we have a lot of hackers in this at this convention here. I saw some of the negativity where Sony at first did a very nice formal apology. If you watch the whole press release, I think it goes for 90 minutes. Yes, you're not. I thought, was I imagining it, or was it? Yeah, it's bizarre. But then they did something absolutely silly, which was make a probably unsubstantiated allegation that what is it, anonymous, a little group we may know about here, was probably behind it. And I thought that's living dangerously. To apologize and then blame a third party, claiming, I guess, that because of their sophistication, they couldn't have protected themselves. And Moxie will have something more to say about that than I ever could. Epsilon, that's another one. Maybe one that wasn't so popular, because a lot of people don't know what Epsilon does. Epsilon is the largest permission-based email marketing company in the world. So they distribute over 40 billion emails a year. And everyone thought, well, what does that mean? So a bunch of email addresses were stolen. Well, just think of the science behind this. You not only have an email address, and then think of who it is. It's all the banks. JP Morgan Chase, Capital One, there's Kroger's, there's Marriott, but it's all the major. Oh, okay, I got to move along. But if you want, there's a great article about this one. Is that just look how you can connect the dots. Once you start creating your own web pages that have the look and feel of JP, you've got your target audience. You're not guessing that this is a customer at JP. You know they have an account. And so this creates a whole new thing. This is called spear phishing. You know exactly what you're doing because you have the relationship already established. And I have to admit, to their credit, Epsilon has changed their entire home web page to be a tutorial about understanding. It's an enormous consumer alert. I recommend, I saw a couple people here from Ferris that I know from my teaching days in information assurance. is that it's a great tutorial on for end users on how not to react and how to identify phishing attacks. How to be a little bit smarter about when they click yes. All right, critical data. This is the stuff that triggers all kinds of statutes. This is my practice sweet spot, because this is why when I run around into organizations such as yours, and usually the general counsel sitting there, Carol, just fix it, find out what the heck happened, is I'm always getting into the inner basements of data centers saying, I need to see the data population. I need to see it because I got a data map, and this is just a short list to different statutes. All right, and in Michigan, we have our own Social Security Privacy Act. We have our own. We have all kinds of segues from the Identity Theft Protection Act. Driver's license and a name is a bad situation to lose. It's not just everything we think about. Protected health information, of course, I understand that we have a lot of people here from healthcare institutions. That's a whole nother dynamic with even its own set of data breach notification rules. So in Michigan, we've got the top 5. How am I doing, Jane? Okay, with the Identity Theft Protection Act, it really has a series of amendments under it that include a lot of other stuff, including the destruction of data, how we destroy this data that we have. We're absolutely responsible for, and I strongly recommend don't hire a real estate lawyer to help you make that leap of logic into what's a data breach, what matches up to these statutes and what doesn't. So the Identity Theft Protection Act rolled into our lives several years ago. It's where it makes it a crime to personally identify information of another with intent to commit a crime or sell such information. So it remained pretty basic. I think we were the 32nd state to come up with ours. But then this past April 1st, we added some jazz to it. And this is covering web pages and electronic communications where we're purporting to be someone who we are not. Finally, in the state of Michigan, we did this April 1st, 2001. Sorry, I'm always apologizing for the law. We're always 20 years behind, or 10 years behind technology. Data breach notification, there's a lot of, this is the Michigan statute, requirement to notify residents of Michigan upon the discovery of a security breach. And it's triggered very easily. I just gave a sample there, so you can check that out. Data breach notifications apply to people who host data. Host data as well. That's just a big one to get on the radar. And then the primary obligation of a lawyer like me running around your data centers is to make that call. I'm like a little umpire. Ball or strike. Is the breach likely to cause a substantial loss or injury to or result in identity theft with respect to one or more residents of the state? Again, I plead with you, do not use a real estate lawyer to make this call, because they always go conservative on you and will call everything a breach. My famous story is having to race into a room where the security guys were with the officers of the corporation, and all that happened was a ping attack. Major. But I actually had to sit down the 22-year-old IT guy, and then especially I was mad, I drove 88 miles. And I said, wait a minute, are you saying this is just a ping attack? And I look at the executives. Did you hear what he just said? He goes, yeah, we were breached. I said, no, that's not what he said. Okay, I made him pay my billable hour for that too, incidentally. Is I had to explain what a ping attack was, and I had to take the youngster aside saying, you got to remember who your audience is. All he knew was something bad was happening at your server. And he made a giant leap of faith. So, and did not understand technology. I said, sir, all that happened is somebody's knocking on your door. I got to go because I have 50 other clients waiting for me. So I'm a little bit late here too. So breach evaluation criteria, this is the thing. This is the kind of stuff I end up sitting with your IT guys discussing. Encrypted, not encrypted, was it redacted, was it unredacted, what were the access and permissions? And then if it's an outside device, do we have to guess? Was there a backup? I guess, okay, and now I gotta go. So what I will say is, I always close with, yeah, see there's little trailers, okay, PSI DSS, not a law, but may as well be, because those entities, American Express, will tell you what to do. Insurance coverage, my recommendation, get it. And I described my practice to you. I do recommend you pick up that 2010 Data Breach Investigation Report report by Verizon. Look at these recommendations that they make. If you have any questions, there's my email address and you know where to find me.